Hello everyone and welcome back to the TVP late game analysis, where we're actually going to try and make tanks work here. Alright, so we left off where the beginning of the late game started, and if you don't remember, it just starts with the use of Templar and Colossus, and a moderate of both, just it threatens a reaction out of us, or from us. The beginning of the late game is signified by +3/+3 ending. Now, I do recap a little bit because we started at 20 and we left at 21. So since our opponent is already done with their late game stuff, we still need to buy some time to get our tanks out. And I'm just going to rewind here, or I did rewind here by about a minute, just so to illustrate this. Now our point here is to stall just so that 3-3 is done and we can buy tanks out. So we're just going to engage, force some storms, not take too much damage. Really good storm there. Every other storm is either not that great or completely whiffed. So in this regards, we get what we want done. And with my little force here, I'm going to try and use another prompt. Now he's a little bit indecisive. He's going to end up chasing this army. And he does land one decent storm. He does have the Fortuna overcharge, which is good. It's going to force us away. And finally, 3-3 is done. Our tanks have enough time to do stuff, so we're okay. He does catch up on the worker count, so although he is behind, he's not out of it yet. Now here you might ask me, how in the world would you use tanks? And of all matchups, why would you use tanks in TVP? Well, if you think about it, tanks share some of the roles that ghosts have, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So firstly, tanks, as long as they're with your army, which they're not here. The role of the Ghost, one of them, is to land some key EMPs on the opponent's army before the engagement starts, which, if you have tanks, tanks can do that too. Tanks are really good at doing that. And in this case I don't, because I'm sieging, I don't have anything with my tanks. Everything just falls apart. But tanks are usually pretty good at using their range against our opponents. Here I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. Okay. So here we do have enough for tanks. Or we do have enough time to make tanks. Since we killed off our opponent's army, he doesn't really have enough time to remake anything in attack, so he's going to just stay back and play defensively, which is, of course, good for us. And we're going to attack. We're going to leave some of the... Okay, so here, one of the other uses that tanks have that ghosts may not have is that because of their range, they're a little bit more effective at harassing long-range workers there. And this is the thing that still haunts me to this day. This is the most embarrassing I've ever done. I misclick and I lose my entire army. Whoops. Which is not all bad, because here we do put some pressure and we do get a couple of kills. But our opponent does clean us up and takes out the tanks too. In return though, we do get some damage to the economy line. So we're not out of it completely yet. Yeah, I even admitted to it. Alright, so behind this, we do have everything we need. It's important to note that when using tank play, although the tanks are pretty good at using the initial damage, they're also not bad at sniping the Templars. Like, you can use the tanks as you would use the Ghosts to try and snipe the Templars because they can get stormed, just because of the huge range. But it's a little bit harder with tanks than it is with Ghosts. Just because you have to micro your bio as the army barrels down towards you, which can be a little bit difficult. Alright, so I'm still buying time for the tanks, so I'm just going to harass. If you see me pushing out without the tanks, you normally know I'm not really in for the proper engagements, I'm just trying to harass. And that's what we're going to be doing. The income is in my favor still. And his army is a little bit out of position. We're going to try and force him to engage using some storms and some micro. So Wisp one storm, that's a pretty decent storm. And that's not a good storm. This is not that great of a storm either. So he wisps a couple storms. That one was useless. Oh, we brought our tanks. But it's okay. Our tanks can take part in the engagement. Another way which the tank is useful, which the Ghost may not be as good as, is that the tanks protects your army. Because of the range, your opponent can't just sneak a Templar along this path and storm. No, he has to take his entire army a move, and do something from there. And here's what I mean. Tanks are really good at defending. They may not be good as ghosts, as focus firing the Templars that come barreling down towards you, but at defending versus sneak attacks, they're even better than the ghosts are. And you're gonna see this once again soon. I'm gonna fast forward. Oh, maybe not. So I'm just trying to force him into the tank line. And you can see what I mean just by how easy it is to snipe these things. And he has to stay back. I'm going to try and force his hand by just stimming up and just doing as much damage as I can. I'm going to snipe the Nexus. He has to go within the tank range to defend, so he's going to opt to not defend. And here I could have ran back and defended, but I chose to snipe the Nexus here instead. Which is fine, because he's already economically screwed. And I do have to apologize, because this may not be the most interesting of late games. From here on out, it's pretty obvious who's going to win. But at the same time, it's very rare that I encounter a protoss who actually goes all the way to late game with me. Everything is either outdated, or I play against my friends, so yeah. Also, on the few games where I do play against protosses, it's very rare that I get to go for my standard play that I want to go. So I don't bring my tanks, so this is not really meant to force an engagement, it's just designed to do some economic damage. And I retreat the moment I spot his army. See if I can get a storm, which I don't, so that's okay. I am so annoying. I am just so annoying with this bio army. Alright, so everything's in the red, but that's okay, because back at home we should have enough medevac to heal this. Right, so we have the medevacs. As long as the Colossus count doesn't get too high, which I do notice that our opponents stop with the Colossi, we don't really need that many Vikings. This is why I stop with the Vikings, and we do reassemble with the tanks. And from here on out, this here is something that that ghosts do not offer. If you're winning against a Protoss, when you're going for Ghost, you can't straight up go walk in a move and just win the game, because, well, you can't really force an engagement since Storm have about the same range as EMPs and even Snipe, so you have to be more careful. With tanks, you can force an engagement. If you're winning, you can end the game, which is always a nice thing to do. You can also force positional advantage, which he has to go the long way to defend this. And while he's doing this, like, he does get the forces at the end, but while doing so, he does give up his position. So I'm going to gain control of the watchtower, move all my forces, and from here on out, I mean, he's lost so much. Again, I do have to apologize, this may not be the best game in the world, but for our intentions and purposes, it will serve. It will serve. And again, he can't get within tank range because he loses the Templar. Templars have low energy and they're very slow. The only way for him to engage with Templars is to aim move, like engage with the whole army. And over here, I do lose a lot of bio, not because tank play is weak, but because I just don't hide as I should. I'm not dodging the storms. I'm letting my opponent just throw storms at me, storms after storms. And that's okay though, because we are in the lead, and this is the power of the late game. In the late game, you should have the economic advantage at all times. You should have the production capabilities, and by that I mean like factories included and starports included, just to have everything you need and to reinforce massively. And you should also have the tech that you want. You should be more or less ahead, maybe not ahead, but about a little bit far behind, but not far behind. Maybe even on tech at this point on. And from here, it's just GG. I mean, he's gonna try and do stuff, but man. One thing you have to watch out for if you ever try a tank heavy style is that it has different weaknesses than Ghost style. Of course, using Ghost, you're not weak to... Okay, so he does get my whole army. Using Ghost, you're not weak to air. Using tanks, if you use lots of Marauders, you are really weak to air. So if you don't have the Vikings, Marines is a good substitute, but still, you have to watch out. Drops do count as air. Like Immortal drops, they count as air. A second thing you have to watch out for, of course, would be immortal play. If you're going for heavy marauders into tanks, then you have to watch out for immortals. Which, if you're getting ghosts, you don't really need to worry about. Or once again, going for heavy marine will counteract this. I'm paying attention here. I'm not really paying attention because I'm figuring he won't do anything. I take out another base and I'm focusing on the drop, and I don't really notice the storms. I don't micro against the storms. That's okay. Right, and from here the game is pretty much over. Right. So as I said, you are weak to some sorts of airplay. The immortal play is one of them, and in this game our opponent went for Templar play, which you are weak against Templar with a combination of heavy zealots. You have to be careful with that, because the way it works is that the zealots will charge, because if he leads with the Templars, then they will get sniped by the tanks. So you have to micro the bio, or maybe try to snipe the Templars with the tanks, whatever you want. And you have to kite, while the storms and the charge lots go to town on the tanks. Your bio can kite back, and will usually deal with most of the zealots in that regard, so you'll only have the Templars left. Still have to be careful. So, because, I mean, my way of dealing with it, a way of dealing with that would be to go Ghost once again, or Marines, because Marines are pretty good against charge lots. And once again, the thing that I do that you may not have to do, if you've noticed, well, first I don't go Ghost, you might want to do that. Second thing is that if you look at the add-ons, 8 reactors. Wow. If you're going for Ghost, you might want like 8 tech labs and maybe 4 reactors, but since I am going for Marine Heavy, I'm just comfortable with this. But this is something that you should probably not do. You should probably have between um, at least 6 tech labs if you're going for Ghost. If you're going for Ghost, you might want to consider getting 8, maybe 9-ish. But yeah, this is one way of playing late game versus Protoss. And I will say that this allows you to transition a little bit better into the late game, but it is a little bit weaker and a little bit more gimmicky during the late game. So always be careful if you try to incorporate tanks like I do. So other than that, I will say that, well, you always want to continue making orbitals. Like in this game, I don't really have that many, but especially in the late game, if you continue making orbitals, your army size can really make a difference. And you can incorporate immortals, but just or not immortals, ghosts, but just be aware that they share some of the same roles as the tanks. So the roles may overlap, they may not be as useful as they would be without the tanks there. One last final nice thing that this allows you to do is it allows you to transition out of tanks. If your opponent is going for, I don't know, like say immortal or whatever, like some sort of weird play, some sort of weird sky toss play, um, with the upgrades, which by now you'd probably get +3 armor, you can transition to air and maybe get 1 or 2 battle cruisers, ravens, whatever you want. But once again, this is only available to this sort of play. When you're going for Ghost Viking, it's really hard to transition out of it. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys learned a thing or two. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Hope you like it. Bye bye for now, guys.